gang, that's the squad I bango.
Hello everybody and welcome back to Yesterday Today. I'm your host Dylan Rolfsen, and before we get to our main segment tonight, here's some of the world's news through my eyes and Dylan's lenses. The chasm between the U.S. and Russia continues to deepen as Russia shot down a U.S. military drone on Tuesday over the Black Sea. Russia has alleged that the U.S. drone was gathering intelligence, which it most certainly was, and Secretary Blinken said that the act was an act of aggression, which it most certainly was. I seriously don't see Putin's endgame in this whole war, though. Many say that he wants to bring back glory to Russia and bring back the days of the powerful USSR. Does anyone need to remind Putin, though, that the glory of the USSR ended because of political corruption and the collapse of the economy? I mean, the only thing he's been able to achieve so far is the greatest military feat of all time, the rags to riches story of the world military. He turned the second most powerful military in the world into the second most powerful military in Ukraine. Zelensky is kind of like Putin's fairy godmother. If the fairy godmother in Cinderella stole all of her possessions, humiliated her, maimed all of her animal helpers, and left her embarrassed on the world stage. Speaking of Russia, Donald Trump is anticipated to be arrested any day now. I'm not sure what you call it, but I guess Donnie sent out a rumble on his Rumble account where he claimed that he anticipates his own arrest by the Manhattan's DA's office as soon as next Tuesday. This is absolutely wild to watch, and honestly, it's a day I never thought would come. But it really is weird that he's being brought in over alleged hush money payments paid out to an adult film star. I can't help but think back to Al Capone. And I know that comparison is really harsh, but after all of the crime and filth that Al Capone committed as the most famous gangster of all time, he ended up being busted for tax evasion. Trump has been investigated for everything under the sun, from inciting a riot to tax fraud to undisclosed payments. That's a real golden corral of criminal buffet charges. And to be honest, I always thought that maybe, just maybe, Trump may not be arrested. Maybe he was just blowing smoke to try and rally up his supporters into protesting. Maybe he was just trying to spark his base. However, I saw an analysis that pointed out a startling fact from Trump's self-published Truth Social video. Look at this graphic. That man is darker than he has ever been. Maybe he's prepping to be in a dark, dark place for a little while with no self-tanner. Who knows? On the lighter side of things, if you can call it that, is news coming out of Florida of the Great Sargassum Belt that is heading towards the Florida coast. Now, I don't know if you've heard of this story, but basically there's this giant glob of seaweed heading straight for the Florida coast and the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. There's over 6.1 million tons of the nasty stuff floating in the ocean, and according to the University of Miami, the algae could fill over 3,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools. 3,000. Evidently, the algae is caused by Saharan dust clouds and is relatively harmless. The main harm to come with the algae, though, comes when it washes ashore and begins to decompose. It can create a noxious fume that stings the eyes and lungs. I wouldn't really call algae in general harmless, though, to be completely honest. I have a bone to pick with algae personally. It was responsible for a day of pain and exhaustion to me. No, seriously. So, one time, I was on the beach with my family, and they all went out before me, right? I went down to the beach. I didn't have my glasses on. I didn't have my shirt, and I didn't have shoes on. We're at this island, and it's off the coast of Florida as well, and it's really remote. There's not a lot of people there. It's not super fancy, but it's pretty, not really built up all that much. So the beaches are pretty dead. I looked left, I looked right, I didn't see my family. To the right, I saw a big glob of algae, and to the left was big open beach. And I remember them saying that they wanted to go for a walk. So I figured, let's start booking it left and see if I can catch up with my family. As I started walking, though, I realized, obviously, without my glasses, I'm blind. So I was walking, and as I passed every single family or group of kids, I couldn't tell if it was my family or not. So I had to get really uncomfortably close to every single family on the beach, and I would get real close and I would squint at them, try and see if it was my family. Long story short, none of them were my family. I made it probably a mile down the beach. I didn't have shoes on. My feet were hot. I had blisters. I walked all the way back to our starting point, and I looked back in the other direction, and I saw the glob of seaweed, but I realized that the glob of seaweed was moving, and it wasn't seaweed, it was my family. I walked up to them, and they said they were there the whole time. So long story short, when I started to get lost, I should have just stopped, looked both ways, and shouted, "Kelp!" That was really bad. Coming up next, we'll be talking about the new vintage revival going on across all corners of modern youth culture, and I'll be taking to the street to ask people what they think. Don't go anywhere.
Make my earthquake, make my earthquake. Riding around, and they'll be shaking me up, and it's making my heart.
Run it. Check my bankroll, AO 400K for vehicle. Paint job look like ashy ankles on Django. Interior look mango, shotgun grape.
Welcome back to Yesterday Today. My name is Dylan Rolfsen, and I, just like you, have noticed one major thing that's in now in pop culture: the old. And of course, that's not a new thing. What's old eventually always comes back into style, but eventually everything leaves, or should leave, the popular stage for good. We see this in politics frequently. I mean, you could read the transcripts from political debates 50 years ago, and they would sound exactly like the debates we're having today. Just switch out a few names and voila. It's like you're watching a rerun of your favorite show, or not so favorite show, honestly. Even social issues from the 50s are still somehow prevalent today. I feel like at some point we're supposed to, move on and develop as a people past things in society like, racism. Like, how ooga booga do you have to be to make any assumptions based on the color of anything in your life? It's like some people are perpetually stuck in toddler trying new foods mode, where we automatically think icky things about something that's green. I don't get it. Anyways, rant over, back to the topic at hand, vintage things. So fun and fresh. Honestly though, I get the whole vintage clothing trend that's happening right now. I think we all kind of collectively got sick of the same, fast fashion, Nike swoop, cookie cutter clothing pretty quickly. And what easier way to try and fix that than to look to the past and see what they did. And honestly, clothing in the past, it's all higher quality. The shirts are heavier, they're more durable, the colors and the designs are more unique and uncommon. You're kind of transported back to when clothes were more comfier, more neutral, less obnoxious, and higher quality. I mean, it's great all around. And don't get me started, my fanny pack has saved me from being without a pin at least twice, at least 2 times. There's some trends in the vintage fashion scene, though, that don't make any sense to me at all. Look, you can get a nice retro pair of looking like brand New Balance shoes for pretty cheap, right? I mean, like 50, 60, 70 bucks. Unfortunately, though, I've seen people spending more on a pair of Reeboks than my car that I drove in high school is worth. Now, I don't know if that speaks more to the shoes or to the car that I drove. I drove a 1998 Honda Civic. It was nice, don't get me wrong. But one day I walked outside and the underbody was on the ground, whole thing, pile of rust. But seriously, I've seen Jordans that were released in the early 2000s selling for well over $1,000, or buying a pair of jeans that look like I mowed the lawn in them 80 times and then sent them through a wood chipper. I mean, I think at some point our generation has to find the balance between a vintage windbreaker and a pair of pants held together with duct tape and a shoelace. It's not just clothes that have been affected, though. Vintage technologies have also been coming back in full force, and I gotta say, I'm not sure our parents and grandparents' generations really get this one. Let's take me, for example. I love collecting vinyl records. I'm a bit of an audiophile, and I just love the artistry behind putting a record on, and I really appreciate the work, time, talent, and effort that went into creating an album as a piece of art. But in high school, my parents just didn't get it. I mean, come on, Mom. I know we have the Apple Music family plan, but I love the classic record player. The one that skips beats every other beat and makes you physically get up and turn the record over every 20 minutes. I got to get my steps in some other way than sitting and shaking my Apple Watch like I'm an old man cursing at kids for playing too loud outside. And vintage film cameras. There's nothing that can really catch the film grade like an old Olympus or Nikon. No matter how many digital filters you add to a picture, you're never going to get that look better than the real thing. Some things just haven't quite caught on yet, though, and I'm going to try and peer into my crystal ball and see what things might be coming up as the next trendy vintage item to storm into the mainstream. Maybe the classic cassette tape. Who needs streaming services or records or CDs when you can have a music player that requires you to physically rewind the tape with a pencil and hope that it doesn't get tangled? Or how about floppy disks? At some point, cloud storage is going to get lame for people, and carrying around 5,555 floppy disks in order to run Adobe Premiere for my video editing sure does sound fun. And yes, I actually did the math. On average, that's how many floppy disks you'd need to house this year's Adobe Audition. And finally, old school tube TVs. I mean, who needs 4K and HDR when you can have a screen that takes up an entire wall, weighs 300 pounds, and has a 3-second delay? We'll see what the future holds. And up next, I'm going to take to the streets downtown and ask some Lynchburgians about what they think about these potential vintage throwbacks. Don't go anywhere.
Georgia peach on east side like it's ATL. You lacking, you tripping, you slacking, impatient, be waiting, confused like what happened. You get attitude cause I'm getting mad.
Welcome back to Yesterday Today, and this past weekend, me and my fiance took to the streets of downtown Lynchburg to see what residents thought of vintage trends, real and fake. Let's bounce downtown to see. Hey everyone, we are in the vintage spirit using the old 90s fish cam lens, and we are down here at the community market in downtown Lynchburg. We're gonna be asking some people what they think about vintage trends and if they can tell which ones are real or fake. Let's get to it. I'm gonna ask you guys a couple of true false questions. So you have to guess to see if this vintage trend is actually happening or if it's a fake trend that I made up, if that makes sense. Okay, cool. Okay, so first question, vinyl records sold more than CDs last year. True or false?
True.
Okay.
True.
True or false?
True. True. True.
I'm going with true.
True?
Yes.
That is true. Okay. I'm gonna give you an over under. Do you think vinyl sold over or under 40 million copies last year?
I'll say over.
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 40 million. I'm going to take the under on that one.
Take the under?
Under. Under. Over.
The over is correct. 41 million records were sold last year. Yep. Cassette tapes are starting to come back into retail stores like Target. True or false?
False.
False.
False. Yeah, false.
I think that's true. Not very well, but I think that I have seen more cassette tape options, but I don't think
Really?
it's coming back like vinyl records is coming back.
True.
That one is false, unfortunately. They've got vinyl, they've got CDs, but no cassette tapes. Not yet, at least. We'll see. Next one up, pilgrim style bonnet hats are coming back into style, and the youth are starting to wear bonnets again. True or false?
True. False. True. True. False.
Yep, good again. Yep, that one's false. So big box TVs, late 90s, early 2000s, are actually trendy again, and they're being sold in Best Buy. True or false?
I haven't seen that. I'm going to go with false.
False. False. False. False. False. False.
That one's false. Yep, you got that one too. Last question. The youth are ditching USB flash drives for floppy disks. True or false?
What's a floppy disk? What's a floppy disk?
What, 3 1/4 floppy? Yeah, that's false. Then.
Yeah.
False.
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 So
True.
True?
True.
that one's false.
Oh.
What's old is new here in downtown Lynchburg, and we're glad to see people in the retro spirit. Let's hop back to the studio. That really was such a great time. Shout out to my fiance for being the best camerawoman a man could ask for. And that's going to tie up this week's show in a neat little bow. Thank you for sticking around to the end. I want to give a quick shout out to my crew, Haley, Mary, Jonas, Dom, and my wonderful fiance, Mel, for coming in and helping with today's show. Remember to be paying attention to what's happening around you, because you might not know what was relevant yesterday might be relevant today. I'll see you guys next week.
Straight up. Cash in, cash out, cash in, cash out, cash in, cash out, cash in, cash out, 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 cash in, cash out, cash in, cash out, cash in, cash out, cash in, cash out, cash out, cash out, cash out, cash out. Riding in the car with no keys, straight up. Louis V shirt with no sleeves. On God, slaughter gang, I'm reppin'. 21. Chopper get to preaching, I'm the reverend. 21. Call him new era, he capping. Yeah, them the type of I ain't that on God. When I book a show, make my back end cashin'. 21, Uncle Sam dog, I'm taxing. Riding in the coupe.